Here to talk about all these things is one congressman who has been warning us all about these houses of cards that were about to fall down for years. Congressman Ron Paul, he joins us by phone from Texas, and our own Elizabeth McDonald is here to guide us through all those weeds of regulations and lame-brain laws that politicians come up with and that we're all subjected to. But, Congressman, first to you, is this the pot calling the kettle black when we hear all these politicians wagging their fingers about the bad things that bankers have done that got us into this mess?
I think there's no doubt about it. I think especially congressional activity of telling them what kind of loans to make and make them low-interest loans and low down payments, the whole works, and these affirmative action type loans. But then again, the major part that I talk about so much is the whole process of easy money. You know, I say easy come, easy go, and easy money has been there. And it's been pushed into the banking system. So the banks were participants, but they were more or less participating in a system that was created by the politicians, the monetary system, the financial system, as well as the congressional mandates. And it was destined to come down. It has come down. But the tragedy is the politicians and the same economists are still in charge, and they said, well, yeah, maybe we spent too much, borrowed too much, and printed too much. But the only thing we know how to do is do more. So they're doubling their efforts. And there's not a chance in the world that we're going to have an answer come out of Washington very soon.
Spent too much, borrowed too much. We're looking at Ben Bernanke, by the way, who might get thrown under the bus as well. But, Elizabeth, the president is very proud about his roots as a community activist. But one of the prime things that community activists did was try to force banks and get their buddies in Congress to make banks make loans to poor people who probably shouldn't be in houses, the mortgages of which are driving this whole system bankrupt.
Yeah, you're right, David. Why don't we have a rent policy until you can afford to own? You know, it's no small irony that at a time when the president is moving to cap risk at the nation's bank, that the government has uncapped the credit pipeline that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac enjoy into the Treasury. In other words, they uncapped it. It was at $400 billion, and they just took that cap off. And even Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in their securities filings to say that the nation's housing policies will cost taxpayers money. They've already cost about $110 billion in taxpayer losses. And, you know, the TARP losses, when we talk about that, the banks to date have yet to cost money to the TARP. It's AIG, the automakers, and the home loan modification program is costing taxpayers money.
Well, because the unions, the president's buddies in the unions essentially own the car companies. But, Congressman, you know, when you see the fact that Fannie and Freddie Mae are now, you have Barney Frank saying, well, maybe we should get rid of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac after he was the one who prevented them from being audited, prevented them from getting rid of some of their worst subprime loans when everybody else was telling them to. I mean, that's the worst hypocrisy here.
Yeah, and you know that early on I had tried to remove that line of credit. You know, the line of credit was very symbolic, even though they didn't use it, but the guarantee was there. And it wasn't $2 billion of the line of credit they used. They end up using these $400 billion of credit. But the whole principle of the lender of last resort, the government insurance, the FDIC, and too big to fail, and the line of credit and the guarantees, that's all built into the system, and there's no attempt to address that. And maybe there will be some improvement, but it's just back and forth that, no, what we probably need are stricter regulations. We have built in all these mistakes. We expect them to happen, but if you had more regulations, you might be able to protect the people from all the mistakes that the banks are destined to make.
Well, Congressman, let me stop you there with the too big to fail thing, because and the lender of last resort. The Fed is supposed to be the lender of last resort, or at least it was for common folks like us who have savings accounts. Our savings accounts were supposed to be backed up by the Federal Reserve. Then, when we changed the law, when we got rid of GlassSteagall, suddenly the Fed was a lender of last resorts for gambling houses, for a lot of the Wall Street fast talkers. Is that where the problem really began?
Yeah, I think so. I personally, from the belief in the free market, I don't think there should be a restriction against commercial banking, investment banking, if you had a truly free system.
Okay.
But when we voted on that in 1999 to repeal GlassSteagall, I voted against it precisely because it would fall under the guarantees. You know, the FDIC all of a sudden would be protecting these investments. So I was sort of in a mixed deal right there, because I want free market banking and we shouldn't regulate that. But when you guarantee it by the government, you can't justify
Well,
it. And I think that's what Obama was attempting to talk about yesterday.
He was trying to, but a lot of people don't trust him to work things out. But that's the point is that if you're going to have free banking, okay, have free banking. Don't rely on the taxpayer or our currency to back up a lot of these loans.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, the good congressman wrote the book, End the Fed, and he knows full well that the Federal Reserve is about to end its purchases of mortgage-backed securities to keep the housing market afloat. That's the thinking on Wall Street, that the reason why they uncapped that pipeline Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae enjoying to the Treasury. It's because of that very reason, because they're stopping those purchases. So they're going to blow out that balance sheet. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac equate to about half of the country's gross domestic product. What is astounding in this country is that the government, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, I've read the memos, I've seen the documents, and also on Wall Street, everybody bet that the housing market would never crash. So it was sort of like we were going to sell each other our inflated houses into our golden years, into our retirement. And one analyst said that's sort of like betting on, selling annuities to each other if you're on the Titanic. So, that's the way it was. That was a thinking down both in Washington and Wall Street, and that is stunning.
Congressman, I have to ask you what the Senate is going to do about Ben Bernanke. As you may well know, there are two Democratic senators again who just today said that they were not going to. They had been backing Bernanke. Now they're pulling their backing of him. Do you think he is going to survive and get reappointed as chairman of the Fed?
I always assumed he would, and he may still do it, but I think the bets are getting a little tighter right now, and I think this is good stuff because it draws attention to the organization, the regulator, the banking system, the central bank, as the culprit, and I think that is good. Ben Bernanke himself, I always make the point that he personally isn't the one that created all this. It's the system. It was the Alan Greenspans of the world. It's a system that's been around actually for 35 years when we've had no linkage to gold, where they've been just unleashed all of this credit. But I think it's very, very good. I think because intertwined with this is the audit the Fed bill, because a couple of senators put a hold on that on his reappointment until they deal with auditing the Fed. So I think this is very, very good. But there's a long fight yet to go in the Senate, so it's going to be a month or so, I guess, before we know about this. But
it's good to get it out in the open, though. It's good that the American public is now becoming more aware of something that's so important to all of our lives, most of which was going on without anybody noticing. We got to leave it at that. Congressman Ron Paul, good to have you. Thanks very much for being here. We're on a new survey.